The Varnell County Courthouse smelled of old wood and wax, its benches creaking under the weight of curious locals. Elias Carter stood in the defendant's box, his faded jacket patched at the elbows, hair greying and unkempt. His eyes, though, sharp, like they'd seen too much but still held fire. Charged with stealing a loaf of bread and a can of soup from Weller's Market, he faced Judge Marianne Holt, whose gavel commanded silence. "Mr. Carver," she began, her voice like gravel. "How do you plead?" Eliot's lips parted, dry and cracked. "Guilty, ma'am," he said, low but steady. The crowd murmured. Lila Brennan, his public defender, leaned forward, her notes trembling in her hands. She'd met Eliot only yesterday, but something about his quiet dignity gnawed at her. Why didn't he fight the charge? Tom Weller, the store owner, sat in, the front row, arms crossed, his face a mix of pity and frustration. He didn't want to press charges, but theft was theft, and Varnell was a town that valued order. In the back, Clara Hensley, a retired nurse with silver hair, clutched her purse, her eyes locked on Eliot. She hadn't seen him in years, not since the war. The judge scanned the room, her gaze pausing on Eliot's weathered face. "Proceed, Miss Brennan," she said. Lila stood, her voice clear but urgent, asking for leniency, citing Eliot's homelessness, his service in the Gulf War. The crowd listened, some nodding, others skeptical. Eliot stared at the floor, as if the weight of his life pressed down on him. Clara's hands tightened. She knew something no one else did, not yet. Lila's voice filled the courtroom, painting Eliot's story. He'd been a mechanic in Varnell before enlisting at 20, serving 2 tours in Desert Storm. Medals for bravery, a Purple Heart. But the war left scars, ones you couldn't see. Back home, the noise of a car backfiring could send him diving, for cover. Jobs slipped away, his marriage crumbled, and the bottle became his only friend. By 2025, Eliot was a ghost in Varnell, sleeping under the bridge by Route 17. Lila's words hit hard, and the crowd softened, though Tom Weller's jaw stayed tight. He'd seen Eliot around, always polite, but stealing wasn't right. "Judge," Holt listened, her face unreadable. She'd seen veterans in her court before, too many broken by a system that forgot them. But rules were rules. "Ms. Brennan, intent doesn't erase the act," she said sharply. Lila pressed on, calling Eliot to testify. He shuffled to the stand, his boots scuffing the floor. "I was hungry," he said simply. "Didn't mean to hurt nobody." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from years of silence. Clara, in the back, dabbed her eyes. She remembered Eliot in 91, carrying a wounded soldier to safety. Why hadn't she spoken up sooner? The prosecution, a young attorney named Greg Voss, argued coldly. Theft was a crime, veteran or not. The crowd shifted, torn. Lila glanced at Eliot, sensing there was more to his story, something buried deep. Eliot's testimony hung in the air like dust, caught in sunlight. Lila asked about his service, coaxing out fragments of a life few in Varnell knew. He spoke of Basra, the heat, the screams, how he'd dragged a young private named Danny Cole to safety under fire. His squad called him Iron Carver back then. But the war followed him home, nightmares, guilt over those he couldn't save. The courtroom was silent, even Voss pausing his notes. Tom Weller shifted, his anger softening. He hadn't known Eliot was a hero once. Judge Holt's eyes narrowed, her pen still. She'd served as a JAG officer briefly. She knew the cost of war. Lila submitted Eliot's military records, yellowed but intact, showing commendations. "This man isn't a thief by nature," she argued. "He's a survivor, abandoned by the country he served." Voss countered, citing repeat offenses, small thefts over years, never prosecuted until now. The crowd whispered, torn between sympathy and justice. Clara stood suddenly, her voice cutting through. "May I speak, Your Honor?" All eyes turned. Judge Holt nodded, curious. Clara approached, her steps slow but firm. She'd nursed soldiers in 91, including Eliot's squad. "He saved my son," she said, voice trembling. "Danny Cole was my boy." Gasps rippled through the room. Elliot's head snapped up, eyes wide. He hadn't known. Clara's words landed like a thunderclap. She stood at the witness stand, her frail frame steady with purpose. Elliot carried my Danny 3 miles through a firefight, she said. Danny lived because of him. I owe this man everything. Tears streaked her face, but her voice held firm. Elliot stared, his hands shaking. He'd never connected Clara to Danny, never knew the boy survived. The courtroom buzzed, locals leaning forward, some wiping eyes. Tom Weller's arms uncrossed, his face pale. Lila seized the moment, asking Clara to elaborate. Clara described Elliot's courage, how he'd risked his life for others, how he'd visited Danny in the hospital, never seeking praise. He's no thief, she said. He's a man life forgot. Voss objected. Emotional testimony didn't negate the crime, but Judge Holt overruled, her face softer now. She asked Elliot if he remembered Danny. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. Thought he didn't make it. The judge's eyes flickered, something shifting in her. Lila sensed it too, pushing for context. Why had Elliot fallen so far? He admitted to PTSD, untreated, and pride that kept him from seeking help. The crowd was rapt, the air heavy. Then Judge Holt spoke, her voice quieter than before. Mr. Carver, were you with the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines? Elliot nodded, confused. The judge stood, silent, her face unreadable. Judge Holt's silence stretched, the courtroom holding its breath. She stood behind the bench, her robe still, her eyes locked on Elliot. Finally she spoke, her voice low but clear. I was a JAG officer in 91, stationed at Camp Pendleton. I processed commendations for the 3rd Battalion. Whispers erupted. She raised a hand, silencing them. Your name, Mr. Carver, crossed my desk. I read your file. You saved more than Danny Cole. The crowd gasped. Elliot blinked, stunned. Lila's jaw dropped, her notes forgotten. Even Voss seemed caught off guard. Judge Holt sat, her composure cracking just enough to show emotion. You were recommended for a Silver Star. Did you know that? Elliot shook his head, speechless. Clara nodded, as if she'd always known. The judge continued, explaining how Elliot's actions saved 12 men in a single night, though bureaucratic delays buried the nomination. I never forgot your name, she said. Tom Weller stood, his voice breaking. Drop the charges, Your Honor. I didn't know. The crowd murmured agreement, but Judge Holt raised her gavel. Order, she said, though her eyes stayed on Elliot. Lila, sensing the turning tide, argued passionately. This was a chance to right a wrong, to honor a forgotten hero. The climax loomed. Would justice bend for mercy? The courtroom felt smaller now, every eye on Judge Holt. She leaned forward, addressing Elliot directly. The law is clear, Mr. Carver. Theft carries a penalty, but justice isn't blind to context. She paused, her voice softening. Your service, your sacrifice, and the failures of those meant to support you, they matter. She dismissed the charges, citing extraordinary circumstances, and ordered community service, not as punishment, but to reconnect Elliot with Varnell. The crowd erupted, some clapping, others crying. Tom Weller approached Elliot, offering a job at his market. Start fresh, he said, shaking his hand. Clara embraced Elliot, whispering thanks for her son. Lila, tears in her eyes, packed her notes, her faith in the system restored. Judge Holt called Elliot to the bench privately. Get help, she said, handing him a card for a veterans program. You're not alone anymore. Outside, Varnell's streets buzzed with the story. Locals rallied, offering food, a room, support. Elliot, overwhelmed, stood under the courthouse oak, feeling the weight lift just a little. The town hadn't forgotten him now. The camera pans out, Varnell's skyline fading, a narrator's voice closing. In a small Ohio town, one man's... Paz rewrote his future, not with a gavel, but with a name remembered.